Good evening, and welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. We're going to continue discussing Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, book by Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche. It was published in the early 70s. And bestseller. Yeah, it's sold up somewhere around 500,000 copies. And near as anybody can tell, they didn't have computer records back then. Expert editing, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. Actually, I'm appalled at some of the things that are in there. And interestingly, there is a Tibetan teacher named Chögyam Rinpoche who is going to be teaching at the Westchester Buddhist Center August 3rd, on Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. Chögyam Rinpoche is a very learned Lama, and he has been an advisor to the Nalanda Translation Committee, which is made up of many of my friends, students of Trungpa Rinpoche, and is quite a brilliant organization. They do wonderful translations, and he has helped them quite a bit, and they think highly of him. And so he's going to be there August 3rd for the day. You can find out about it if you are interested at the westchesterbuddhistcenter.org website. And I think I'm going to be going up, and I think there are a few others here. Who else is going? Okay, maybe we can make a party. And Judy's going too. Oh yeah, but you were already up there.
Is that a Saturday?
Yes, it's a Saturday, and we can make a party and go up on the train. It's an easy trip, especially if you're over 65. It only costs you something like $6 each way. And yeah, okay. So we are discussing the chapter tonight called Surrendering. As I read this book, and for the last 13 years, I've been studying Chögyam, Great Perfection teachings, with a teacher named Khenpo Namdrol. He was, each of the sects has its school for training lamas. It's called the word for school is Shedra. And Khenpo Namdrol for many years was head of the Nyingma Shedra, so he's quite a learned fellow. And he's been teaching Chögyam to Americans now. He started in 2003, came and for 5 years he taught the Guya Garba Longchenpa's commentary to the Guya Garba Tantra, which each sect has its sort of fundamental main tantra. A tantra is a very terse, cryptic, powerful text that needs very short usually, that needs a lot of explanation. And they don't come from human sources. They come from sort of cosmic sources, you might say. And the main text of the Nyingma sect is the Guya Garba. And Longchenpa, there were 3 main commentaries to the Guya Garba that are taught. One by a fellow whose name I forget. He's a member of a sect called the Zerpa sect. And another one is by the great teacher Mipam Rinpoche, who lived in the late 1900s, early 20th century, late 1800s, early 20th century, and was quite brilliant. And he wrote a commentary to the Guya Garba, and Longchenpa wrote a commentary as well. He lived in the 14th century. And I once asked Trungpa Rinpoche, who did he feel was the greatest of all the Tibetan teachers? And without missing a beat, he said Longchenpa. And Longchenpa is generally regarded that way. when Khenpo Namdrol teaches Longchenpa, he always refers to him. He'll be saying, and then the omniscient one said. That's the way he refers to him, as the omniscient one. And it was interesting in reading in going through the Guya Garbha for 5 years, a month a year. We finished halfway through the 4th year. The Guya Garbha is kind of like an encyclopedia of Tantra. It's actually not Dzogchen. It's what's called a Mahayoga text. That's the next one down before Dzogchen, although it deals with Dzogchen as well. And Longchenpa wrote the longest commentary. It's quite voluminous. And when we got to the end, I was ready to say so long and thanks for all the fish. If any of you know who Douglas Adams is. But, I thought it was wonderful and terrific, but I was ready to move on. But he finished halfway through that month, the 5th year, and he then finished the rest of the month by teaching a commentary by his teacher, Jigme Punsuk, who was a great teacher in Tibet, passed in around 2000, a little after 2000. And Jigme Punsuk wrote a commentary to a text that is legend. It's called The 3 Points That Strike the Vital Essence. And this is by a man named, in Tibetan, his name is Garab Dorje. In Sanskrit, his name is Prahe Vajra. And he was the first human being in the Dzogchen lineage. He received the Dzogchen teachings from Guru Vajrasattva and Vajrapani, who are celestial figures, bodhisattvas. And then he wrote this text. Actually, this text is his last will and testament. It's really almost funny. The way these great teachers die, or pass into nirvana, they have their parinirvana, is they pass, and of course their students and their disciples are all weeping and wailing, and they don't want them to go. And they pass and they sort of ascend into the sky, and then the students are calling to them and begging them not to leave. And they turn around and deliver a last testament. It seems like so many of them do this. And Garab Dorje turned around and he delivered this text called the Siktsum Nadek. It means the 3 points that go to the Nadek as Ne is like the true meaning. What are you doing? Oh, the air conditioning or the fan?
Yeah, well, the fan doesn't really do it.
Okay.
It's pushing around hot air, in other words.
So did you turn it on, Rochelle? Is it on? Did we turn it on, the air conditioning? No. Okay, Lane's going to. There's a reason why I'm talking about all this having to do with Dzogchen. And then halfway through that 5th year, he switched into this commentary to the 3 points that strike the vital essence, and I was stunned. I was sitting there in an audience of 150, 200 people, and everything changed for me. And I went back, and his main translator, whom I hope you all have a chance to meet, his translators, are a couple. Lama Chunam, he's a Tibetan, very learned. He goes by the title Lama, which is sort of a low title, but actually he's a Khenpo, which is a very learned title to be a Khenpo. Khenpo Namdrol is the teacher. And to be a Khenpo means you've gone through the Shedra and graduated and you've learned a lot. And then his partner is who does the actual translation, the oral translation, is Sangye Khandro. And she is an absolutely brilliant translator. She's American. Who went to India when she was in her late teens and became a Tibetan Buddhist and is today one of the finest oral translators probably in the world. And so I called them up and said, let's invite Khenpo Namdrol to come back and teach Dzogchen. And we did, and he has. Since, I think it's 2007 or 8, he's been coming back almost every year and teaching Dzogchen almost completely Longchenpa, but a couple of other things as well. He prefers Longchenpa, but then he taught a couple of other Dzogchen texts. The reason I'm saying this is that I and most of Trungpa Rinpoche's students feel that while he was teaching us even the most beginning doctrine of the lower yanas, that he was doing it in the style of Dzogchen, that it was basically Dzogchen teaching, that he simply everything that came out of his mouth was Dzogchen. The key feature of Dzogchen, and the reason why it's so appropriate, and this book is so appropriate to our practice here today. The lower yanas, they say, take mind, ordinary mind, as the path. And by that, what we mean is they take the thinking mind as the path. So if you do a contemplation on Maitri, you are using ordinary mind. It's called sem. When you are watching your thoughts and letting them go and coming back to the breath, you are using your ordinary mind, which is called sem. You're taking mind as the path. When you do, even in the tantras, when you do what are called creation and completion practices, these are where you visualize tutelary deities who represent your enlightened aspect of your enlightened mind. And you identify with these deities, and you do practices that are quite complex, involving mantra, reading, you read through a liturgy, and there are hand gestures and symbols, and you do meditation, and you visualize the deity both in front of you and yourself as the deity and so forth. These are using ordinary mind. Dzogchen alone takes wisdom as the path. And by wisdom, I mean the word is, in Tibetan, there are a number of words for it. They all just point to different aspects of the same thing. One of the most common words is yeshe in Tibetan, or jnana in Sanskrit. And it is usually translated as wisdom. It's non-dual wisdom. Yeshe literally means primordial knowing. Ye is primordial from no beginning, never had a beginning. And she is to know. Rigpa is another aspect of this wisdom of the path. Rigpa is the Tibetan for vidya, which means seeing, true seeing. And only Dzogchen takes wisdom as the path. And in order to appreciate what that means in an experiential way, you need to be part of a Dzogchen lineage, which means having teachers who have been trained in this, because this understanding, the understanding of wisdom, is rarely gotten anyway except from a human being who is a teacher. It's passed on individually from teacher to student. And it's like satori in the Zen tradition. In the Tibetan tradition, it's called pointing out instruction, or meeting of the minds of teacher and disciple, teacher and student. And this is the way that wisdom is passed on. And it's very hard to know how to take wisdom as the path unless you have a relationship with someone who can give you that understanding. This text, cutting through, is riddled with this. And I think that's why Chögyam Rinpoche wants to teach it. I saw a quote from him that was put out in an email where he said that this is the text for our time. And I've even heard that he regards this as Dharma, which is a revealed teaching. I don't know, we'll find out maybe on Saturday. We're going to go up and hear him. And he says that you have to study this text, and more, you have to practice it. So, I hope I'm not saying too much, but I feel like Dzogchen, that's the Tibetan for these teachings. It means great perfection. Tsuk means perfect. Chen is great. The Sanskrit for this is often called Ati, A-T-I. It sort of means ne plus ultra, the last, there is no higher. It's also called Mahasandhi. There is a member of our Sangha who has written a book about Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings. He was teaching out of his book. What's his name? Who wrote the author of The Backwards Path of Ati? Ken Friedman. And he wrote a book, and basically what he's saying is that Trungpa Rinpoche started with Ati and taught backwards from there to the beginning for all of his students. And I very much agree that that's what he was doing. So when you read this book and you read these chapters, you can understand that this is coming very much from an Ati perspective. And in fact, I find these teachings are utterly consonant with what I'm learning from Khenpo Namdrol. I'm learning kind of the rationalization of these teachings. So he starts out this chapter. How many people were able to read it? Oh, wow. That's terrific. That's great. By talking about this, he says, the game of spiritual materialism, we are engaging in this for me. Constantly thinking about, what am I getting out of it? If you do that, and we do, it's a mask. It will veil the teachings for you. It's unnecessary. Because really what we are doing is we are uncovering our true nature, which is there all along. That's why when we practice, together, and we're doing this practice of watching the breath going out into space, or you can just be rest in space. You see, space, this space, is the union of the environment, the space that allows everything to arise and pass away. So phenomena are arising right now in this moment, only in the present moment. We're not talking about the past and the future. They are myths. They are stories. They are like somebody sat down and wrote a script about what happened in the past, and you read it and parrot it. Or they write a script about what's going to happen in the future, and it's just a fiction. It never comes out that way. They could have written a script about this meeting, and then we have the meeting, and it's so much more than one could ever put into words. Every moment is. But this present moment takes place in space. And in that space, this gesture arises and passes away. These words come out, and you hear them, and they're gone. The sensation of your bottom on the cushion comes to you because I've mentioned it, and now your mind moves on to something else and it's gone. Everything is arising, including mental events, thoughts, emotions. They are arising and passing away in the present. So when we come back in our meditation practice to this present space, that term is huge in Chögyam. The word is dhatu in Sanskrit, yin in Tibetan. It is the womb of everything, and it is the graveyard of everything. Everything, all phenomena, arise and pass away in space. And the key about space is that it is in utter union with knowledge, with Rigpa, with Vidya, with Yeshe, all of those. There is no difference between this space and the phenomena which are arising and passing away, and the knowledge, the supreme knowledge, the knowledge of an enlightened Buddha. All of it is in union. So you see, we don't have to try to know something. All we have to do is come back to what's already here in this space. This phenomena arising and passing away. You get lost in a dream, don't beat yourself up for it. That's just another dream. See it. And in seeing it, in seeing that mental event, that dream, you can actually learn something about the quality of your own neurosis, your own ego, what takes you away, and you come back to awareness, to pure awareness in the present moment. So the key is that you stop beating yourself up. Beating yourself up is part of wanting to be better. What he's talking about here, the game of spiritual materialism, of engaging in this for me. And we say, gee, I've got to be a better meditator for me. It's a shuck. It's a false dodge. It's just a game we play, and what we really need to do is to be coming back to what is arising in this present moment, anything, whatever it might be, including thoughts, dreams, seeing them, accepting them. Accepting them is huge. Accepting your thoughts, because that is the development of true compassion in the most fundamental sense, that you are going to be compassionate towards yourself. See, to try and make yourself better in some way, like a better meditator, is very uncompassionate, because then we're saying, there's something wrong with me. I got to make myself better. It's very hard on yourself. There is a huge power to accepting everything that's arising and seeing it. And it's amazing what it can do. It can transform your awareness of your meditation and yourself. So he says this, the game of spiritual materialism, which means you want to get something out of your meditation, out of your spirituality, out of Buddhism. Constantly thinking about, what am I going to get out of it? Treading the path and wondering why I am on it. It's all about me, instead of about others. And that's what we let go of. At some point we come to the conclusion that we should drop this whole game. Drop our agendas, our masks, because we got a mask. We said, I'm a good Buddhist, but what's really going on is, what am I getting out of this? Me. So what we're really surrendering to, you see, and this is what surrender is all about, is we are surrendering to ourselves as we are, as we arise in this present moment. Stop trying to change ourselves to some idea that we've absorbed of a better person. If you do that, and you do a violence to yourself and to the world. So what we're actually surrendering to is we're surrendering to the reality that arises now. We're giving up our desire to make ourselves better according to some dream that we have internalized of a better me. He says, but it's not easy to give up our self-focus, to let go. See, when you do that, when you give up this self-focus about me and my self-improvement, then you're letting go into the present moment. You're becoming a citizen of this moment, of this world, of this universe. But when we've got this hidden agenda, this idea of self-improvement, then we're sort of alone and we're secret, we're furtive. There's a furtiveness to it. And that's what has to be surrendered, this opening out. Opening to the present, opening to the world. And he says this, if our lifestyle and inspiration is working toward an unfolding of the mind in this way, then we will almost certainly find a personal guru. Because here's the funny thing. You would think that as you progress along the path, the teacher becomes less important because you become more accomplished. You actually make progress. At the level of Chögyam, the teacher is paramount. The relationship is paramount because this kind of understanding is only passed from one human being to another. It's possible to get it without. I mean, Trungpa got it from Samantabhadra, Vajradhara, and Garab Dorje got it from Vajrasattva. So it can happen, but it is really, 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 really rare. And for most of us, we need the help of another human being. And it's really beautiful because in making this transmission from one human being to the next, it involves the deepest, most open friendship that there can possibly be. It's total openness and honesty and communication between two human beings. That's what has to take place. And there are teachers around who are capable of it. Now, I heard Khandro Rinpoche give a talk years ago at the Shambhala Center of New York, back in the days when they were still inviting Tibetans. They stopped doing that. And she was talking like this, and someone said, well, how do you find such a person? And she said, it's karma, it's magic, and it may not happen in this lifetime. It may happen in some future lifetime. So there are no guarantees. But you do your best. You tread the path, you listen to the teachings, you work with teachers, because these teachings, all the teachings, not just Chögyam, have to be handed down from one person to the next. And Trungpa Rinpoche said it was like hot bread. The student has to eat it fresh from the oven. Another analogy for it is of passing a candle flame. And the teacher has a lit candle and the student's candle is not lit, and the teacher lights the student's candle. And then the student turns around and lights the next student's candle, and it gets passed that way. He says, our preconceptions of what the guru is are a problem. They block our true communication with him, with this person. And we have our ideas of what the spiritual path should look like, and our teacher and me. He once, years ago, gave me instruction on how to give meditation teaching. Now, you might think that it involves saying to the person, well, you cross your legs, you sit down in a chair, whatever you want to do, this is the way you do that, and you watch your breath, and so forth. Here's what he talked about when he said what a meditation teacher is. He said, the teacher opens to the student. Now, you won't know what it's like when you're with someone who is very open, and non-judgmental, non-critical. You relax if you can recognize that, right? And you feel warmed and accepted. And it allows you to relax and open to that other person. And that's what happens between the teacher and the student. And he says that so the student relaxes and opens. This allows the teacher to open further. More warmth, more openness, more trust. This allows the student then to open further. The student feels that. And when I mean open, I mean that the student is showing the teacher just who he or she is. They're not trying to be a good student according to some preconception. That's a huge block. The teacher doesn't want that. The teacher wants your guts. They want the real person there. So then the teacher can open a little further, and it goes back and forth like this. The teacher opening further, that encourages the student to open further. At some point, the student might get frightened. Too much openness. And then the teacher has to shut down. Stop. Because they can become a demon. They can become something that's frightening to the student with too much openness. And you don't want to do that. The teacher doesn't want to do that because it defeats the whole purpose of the whole communication. But the student, back and forth, he called this, he had several names for it. He called it diplomacy. It's like a diplomatic game. You do this, and then I'll give you that, and then you can give me something else, and we'll go back, back and forth like this. He called it diplomacy. What else was? Well, it's making love. It's making love because it's deep, deep friendship, open communication. Save it. Let me just do this. And that's what he was about. And, I think for all of his students. So what the student really wants and the teacher wants is your complete openness. Oftentimes we feel like we've got a mask up. We're walking around presenting a better version of ourselves because we feel that that's what it is required. You walk into a cocktail party, you don't know anybody, and you feel sort of self-conscious. That self-consciousness is a symptom of having a mask up. And when we meet a teacher, and you know that the teacher, you feel like maybe he's going to judge me. I have to tell him what a great student I am, how much practice I've done, this kind of thing. And then maybe he'll accept me as a student. A real teacher doesn't want that. What they want is open, utterly open communication. And that is what is meant by surrender. We are surrendering our masks. We are surrendering our self-defenses. And the teacher has to help with that. He says, surrender also means acknowledging the raw, rugged, clumsy, and shocking qualities of one's ego. You have to show that to the teacher. You can't be trying to put on a good face. And this can be difficult to do, he says. He says, although we may hate ourselves or be very critical, at the same time we find our self-hatred a kind of occupation. If we were to give up our self-condemnation about what's wrong with me, we might feel as though we were losing our job, have nothing to hold on to. Then what are we treading the path for? I'm treading the path because I want to be a better person. I want to become a Buddha. I want to get rid of this corrupt, neurotic, ego-filled self. Well, if you do that, the teacher is not going to like it. He says we have to have a sense of confidence in knowing that we can open. We can. He says we must surrender our hopes and expectations as well as our fears and march directly into disappointment. How about that one? Saying we don't have to pretend. That's putting it mildly. I remember once I was sitting with him, and this was back in about 1970, and I just met him. And he was learning the language, right? He loved the idioms, English idioms. And he was playing with them all the time. And this woman came into the room and to greet him, to meet him. And she put out her hand and she shook his hand and she said, "Oh, Rinpoche, I've heard so much about you. So nice to meet you. Isn't this wonderful weather we're having? And and I've heard your wife is pregnant. You're going to have a baby." And blah blah blah. And she was very, very frightened. I could see, and she was just talking like this. And he just sat there and smiled and nodded and responded, in a calm, nice, polite way. And then she left, and she just blew out the door, She was obviously, really frightened and tense. And he turned to me and he looked at me and he said, "Not a swinger." Meaning she was so frightened, she couldn't be open. She just was trying to fill the space, protect herself, her vulnerability. Now, that may have changed, as time went on. That was the first meeting. And some people, are very frightened in those circumstances. I just remember that. It's so funny, not a swinger. He didn't use that word too much after that, I guess. He says, we prepare ourselves to be an empty vessel, ready to receive the teachings. That could be a little tricky. You can have preconceptions of what it means to be an empty vessel, and you can kind of beat yourself up and, become sort of something low, and that doesn't work. And he says surrendering has nothing to do with levels and evaluation. Instead, we surrender because we would like to communicate with the world as it is. And when we open and we're willing to be who we are as we are, then the communication with the world can really open up. We do not have to label ourselves learners or ignorant people. Surrender means opening, which means communication, linked, direct communication with the object of our surrendering. We are not embarrassed about our rich collection of raw, rugged, beautiful qualities. We present everything to the object of our surrendering. This openness and surrendering are the necessary preparation for working with a spiritual friend. Now that said, just one last caveat about this. You can't go in there, with the teacher and just tear open your shirt because you've read this. Because then you've got an agenda, right? You're trying to be open because you want to get something. It comes out in a very natural, honest way of communicating back and forth. And it has to do with relaxation, and genuineness, and open-heartedness. And it can't be forced. If it's forced, then it becomes ingenuine. And that very forcing becomes a barrier. So you can't go in. Some people would do that. They'd read this kind of thing, and then they go in there and tear open their shirts and try and confess, everything they're ashamed of or whatever it was, as though that would get them somewhere. And it doesn't. So he was very much talking about himself when he gave this teaching, and his relationship with his students in those days. And I think always, probably. So that's all I've got to say. I've said an awful lot, actually. And I hope I haven't violated. You think, Rochelle? Is that okay? Huh? Okay. I just worry because I've really gone pretty far in this, what I've said tonight. So, we can have a discussion if you like.
The subject is extremely far in itself.
Is what?
The subject
is
of
what?
Surrender, of what you're talking about.
Tremendous.
It's tremendous.
I'm just having trouble hearing you.
So it would be not honoring it to in any way hold back or compromise or, one initially, if you just heard the word surrender, people would have all kinds of ideas about that. That it was a simple thing. Like
your voice is dying out. I'm a little hard of hearing, Peter, so you have to speak up if you want me to hear it.
Is this on? Oh, yeah.
That's better.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
I'm relaxing into what you said. That it's so easy to misinterpret when you say surrender. So easy. So you got to make sure you ain't talking about some little thing that you see the teacher once and you say, I want, give myself to you or whatever. It's extensive.
It's what?
Extensive notion of surrender. There's no holding back, in other words.
Yeah, that's good.
And no imitating. So you've touched on all those points very well. Hardly going too far.
Okay.
My opinion, but
helps.
Once, I guess in the late 70s, I met this young woman who, I told her that Trungpa Rinpoche was my teacher, and she said, "Oh yes, cutting through was my Bible for years." I read it every day. I love that book. So I asked her if she ever went to Boulder to meet Rinpoche. And she said, oh no, I didn't feel I needed to do that. That was interesting.
That was what?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because the book was enough for her. So it was interesting to read the book. I mean, then I realized that many people in the 70s read the book, but not everyone felt the need to go and meet Rinpoche, become his student, and actually practice with him. So I think that's what you're talking about.
Definitely.
Not a swinger. She was not a swinger.
Yeah.
What's the difference between Mahamudra and Dzogchen?
Very little. They both require pointing out. But supposedly Dzogchen is further along. It's further along in taking wisdom as the path. What that means, taking wisdom as the path, I'm going to try and help you understand this because it's so beautiful. When we sit here and meditate on space, and you just let your mind rest, you don't even let it rest. It's already resting. All you do is you come back to this space that we're in, and this space is lit with knowingness. It's in union with knowingness. It is knowingness. They're just different aspects of the same reality, which is this space. It's called the Dharma Dhatu, among other things. And the Dhatu is the space, and it's the space in which the Dharmas are phenomena of every kind, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, mental, arise. And if we just come back to it, it's already here, doing it for us. It's not even doing it for us. It's just doing it. It's like all you do is it's waking up. That is the best practice. That is, you are approaching or even doing Chögyam. And it is the fastest practice. It is the practice that will get a sentient being enlightened the fastest. That's a dangerous thing to say, because then it encourages ambition. And ambition is a great obstacle, But it's what we already are. It's our natural being to come back to this simple awareness. And that means not rejecting your thoughts, but waking up to them. It's trying to wake up to them. You're lost in a dream. Suddenly you realize you're dreaming. Take a look. Just note it. This is my style. Each one of us has very habitual patterns in our dreams, the thoughts that come up while we are awake and in our dreams at night. Those patterns are based on our past karma, the training that we've gotten in life about pleasure and pain and hope and fear. They produce these patterns. It's good to see them, because when you see them, when you don't reject them, when you see them, you're free. You're not them. In fact, you're not even you. It's space. So, yeah. The term space, it's funny, for years, I heard Trungpa Rinpoche talking about space. And I kept thinking, why? Why space? What's so important about space? Yeah. It's another word for reality.
For me, it seems to be another word for awareness. Awareness being the container.
This space has a number of different qualities. Within it, and part of it, is the arising and passing away of phenomena. These phenomena arise and pass away, and this is an important word in the teachings, spontaneously. The term in Tibetan is lundrup. Everything is arising, these words, these gestures, everything you're experiencing spontaneously. All these terms are describing what we're sitting here in the middle of, space. It's space because everything arises and passes away within it. It's sort of the great container. Everything arises and passes away and is luminous, meaning it's like it's glowing, telling us what it is. You know, the green of that shirt, the blue of those pants, the sound of this voice, the feeling of your bottom on the cushion. These are luminosity. They are luminous, and yet nothing exists. Nothing has any true being. Because as fast as it appears, it's gone. So you can't hold it. You can't point to what just left. What appeared and left. It's already happened. And it has these two qualities of emptiness, that it passes away like that. You can't grasp it. And at the same time, that it's communicating to us what it is. That's the luminosity. All of these terms, I'm giving you some really advanced stuff that it comes along. These are descriptors from the Dzogchen teachings of reality. And it has all these different aspects: spontaneity, luminosity, emptiness, communication, and then huge, huge heart, compassion. And the compassion is fundamentally the communication between us and everything. And that's what the teacher teaches to the student, is that openness of communication. And it opens up this world, this space. The Dharma Dhatu.
This is a two-part question. You were saying that Trungpa Rinpoche said that the most important thing about being an instructor of some sort is being open. So my understanding or my interpretation of being open with another is that being open is all about listening and taking in what the other has to say, rather than focusing on, one's own thoughts, one's own reactions. But is that right, or do you have some other idea of what openness is?
No, I think you're definitely onto it. Absolutely.
Okay, so then my question is, what does it mean not to be open when the student is being too fearful? I can't imagine that it. Did I understand you right? That you said, well, maybe you should say again. Like, what did Trungpa Rinpoche say an instructor should do when a student is
frightened?
Is frightened.
You pull back. You don't want to scare them.
You pull back. How?
But there's no how. It varies completely with the people. It's absolutely personal. It's like, it's like making love. You're in a constant responsiveness, and if the student pulls back, you stop doing whatever it is that's making the student pull back. You want to encourage them. You want to make them at ease. You want to make them open. Help them open in friendship, in love, in deep communication. And when a person pulls back, they're shutting off. They're saying, "I'm frightened." And you don't keep banging away at them at that point, You might drive them further into retreat.
So would an example be...
well, I love what you're saying.
What would an example be? Trungpa Rinpoche's silence to this person whom he said is not a swinger? Just sitting there and... Just
sitting there and letting them do their thing and smiling and shaking the person's hand. Mm-hmm. He was allowing space. And maybe that person came back and relaxed, because he didn't do anything critical. He didn't reject her. He was just very kind and accommodating. And that would allow her to come back next time and be a little more relaxed,
Right.
We all do that. We've all experienced that.
Yeah, so it's not exactly about closing up in any way.
Who?
Well, when a student is being too fearful, the instructor doesn't exactly close up.
No.
Okay.
No. Instructor's kind. Fear needs help. Not aggression, needs kindness, so that the fear allays, Don't you think? But I love what you said about listening, because this is something we all can do, that when we meet another person, we can be very self-absorbed. In one person says one thing and we bounce into our own little stories. Or we can be open and curious about that person. Because once you start doing that, and this will come along in this book, by the way, you're developing prajna. Prajna is clear seeing. And prajna involves interest. You will become very interested in what you're seeing, even curious. And so you might actually listen really hard to that person who's sitting there and standing in front of you. And you can get all kinds of communication and information from the way you're just looking at their eyes, the way they carry their body, the way they use their words, and gestures, if you want to listen. But usually, the person says, gee, I just came back from Florence. And you say, oh, I was in Florence 3 months ago, and I thought it was great, blah, 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 blah. And we're off. We're self-referential. And we don't listen. As opposed to saying, oh, why did you go to Florence? What were you doing there? How did you like it? What did you like about it? And then sort of going into the person like that.
And that's why I asked the question, because I think it applies to more than the instructor role.
It absolutely does. It applies to the way we move through the world. Definitely. Absolutely. I mean, I remember Rinpoche, when I first met him, he just loved to explore the world. So we took a trip to Buffalo. He was giving a seminar there. And we went through Boston. And on the way, no, I'm not going to say this for video, but we wound up going for lunch in a restaurant. We got off the airplane in Boston. And we went to lunch. And there was Rinpoche and a number of his students, or maybe 7 or 8 people, including his wife, Diana. And we sat down at this table, and everybody ordered food. I'm sitting there, and I look around, and all of a sudden I realize nobody's there. I'm the only person at the table, and all the food has arrived. And I went out, and I started looking for people. Well, what had happened? Richard Arthur, for whom we did a Sukhavati a few weeks ago, had left his suit in the airplane, and he was going out on the tarmac and climbing into one airplane after the next looking for his suit. Marvin had decided that he needed to make sure the bags were being transferred, and he went to the baggage area, and he was trying to, making sure that they'd gotten off this plane and they were getting on the next. I don't know where everybody else was, but I finally found Trungpa Rinpoche in a bar, of course, and he's sitting there talking to a person at the bar, and he's introduced himself. You see, his father-in-law, who had passed away, was named David, and David Pybus. And Trungpa Rinpoche, his clan name was Mukpo. And on his passport, he had taken the name David Mukpo. Right? He took his father-in-law's name. And he had introduced himself to some guy sitting next to him as David Mukpo, and they were having drinks and chatting away. And Rinpoche, he had the other guy had no idea who he was talking to, some Oriental guy, It was very friendly. And it was just, he loved people. And he loved to be with people from the time he woke up in the morning till the time his eyes closed in the evening. That's what he lived for, this communication with his students. Very non-self-referential human being. Anybody else? Carmen.
Thanks for the teachings. Very interesting. There are many things that I find very, very important to link directly to our daily practice, especially to meditation, as you mentioned, right? Because it seems like we cannot develop the quality of openness just by in a contrived way, or like having this good intention, or like, I'm afraid right now, okay, I'm going to be open. Yeah, it sort of has to develop through our sitting meditation. And I was thinking that the breathing aspect might be the communication aspect of ourselves and our environment or other, in relating surrendering as our constant practice through the breathing and the meditation session, because we could come back, as you said, to the present moment or to the now, but then it sort of has the taste of duality as well, as something that is happening to me, or as something that is contrived and I'm sort of like right there in front of it, welcoming it or something like that. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean, yeah.
As opposed to like sort of welcoming it but surrendering at the same time through the subtlety, I guess, of the breathing. Would you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's the real challenge that we have in our practice is to give up trying to improve ourselves through our practice. And one way, say every time you're sitting there and suddenly you realize that you've been having this daydream and you've been gone and you feel badly, right? You feel like, oh, I'm not a good meditator. I got to try harder to come back. And then you try harder and pretty soon you find you've gone again, right? Well, one thing you can try to do, you see, the whole trick is to stop beating yourself up and to see it, to see the whole mechanism of thought. So one thing you can do is you can take all of your thoughts, including the ones about good and bad, about being a better meditator or not being a better meditator, and make them the object of your awareness as they happen, and then let them go. So see that. And then, but to the extent that you can accept those dreams, those departures from awareness, the meditation will change a lot. It'll soften. And not only will it soften, but it will become much bigger in terms of what it encompasses. See, normally we think of our meditation as encompassing just awareness of whatever, the space, the breath, when we're aware. And when we're dreaming, we say, that's not meditation. But you can make that a part of your meditation as well. By bringing it to awareness and letting it go. And there will be moments, flashes, of feeling this quality of, a gentleness, of acceptance of yourself and everything that's going on in yourself. And then you start to lose your center. You see, the center that we feel is all about me, I, me and my ambition, me and my effort, me and my wanting to do it right. And when we begin to develop a compassion for ourselves, that center begins to dissolve. And we begin to become centerless, floating in space more. Then the meditation is really going somewhere. It involves greater awareness, greater honesty, greater compassion, and the giving up of ego. He started, in the beginning of this chapter, he started out by saying, the game of spiritual materialism, we are engaged in this for me. That's the big problem. That's what keeps us stuck. This for me quality. So how do you stop doing that? You can try and stop doing that and it'll still be for me. You have to bring it to awareness. See it. Make it part of your meditation. Maybe we should end? Should we dedicate the merit? I hope it was okay. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. You think if there are any other announcements?